many of us, something that we don't often have a chance to talk about. How many of you have not been to ERIE events before? A couple people. Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. So welcome to ERIE. Welcome to CIIS. This is the California Institute of Integral Studies. ERIE is a student group here at CIIS. Stands for Entheogenic Research, Integration, and Education. Entheogens, another term for psychedelics, looking at it from generating the divine within, but we also look at it from the creative source, or what way can we touch source. And research, integration. Sure. Research, better. So many of us are doing this research, so we thought it would be a great idea to create a platform for us to talk about this all the time. The second part of our acronym is integration. This is kind of the most important aspect, we think, right now. And this is, how do we bring experiences back? How do we bring these noetic experiences, these direct learning, these ways of knowing back into this world? And how can we implement the lessons or the homework assignments, things like that, that we learn into this reality? And then the last part is education. So education is kind of twofold. Education, obviously, first off, is how can we educate the public? How can we also be educated by the public? How can we share information? But the second part is pretty interesting, and this is sort of education by the plants. What can we learn from plants? From indigenous traditions, they might say, what can we learn from plant teacher? Maybe more contemporary, we might say, what can we learn from these cognitive tools? But even, I think, more importantly for this particular panel, it's about what can we learn in general from plants. Now this whole talk is about community, and it's about communication. And so what can we learn from plants and the way they do these types of things? And what I think is really fascinating, I've been reading a lot of research recently about the way that plants communicate, and that they're actually able to, I was reading recently something about a bunch of different trees that when a giraffe starts nibbling on the leaves of a tree in one side, they sort of communicate, and all the trees in that area will have the leaves will become a little more bitter, so the giraffes won't come and eat them. So even though they're totally different families, totally different areas, totally different communities, they're able to interact and dialogue with each other. And that's kind of the idea here. How can we bring all our communities together? How can we interact? How can we dialogue? How can we receive feedback? How can we give feedback, etc.? And this event tonight was actually inspired by a person in our community who passed recently, who is a real inspiration to many of us. And I think through this process of growing and learning our different communities, we're trying to figure out how can we learn to share, how can we give feedback, how can we learn from each other, and how can we get to a place where we feel comfortable being able to share with each other and not sort of afraid or feel shame around that. So that's something that we really want to sort of emphasize tonight, and we're kind of talking about some of these questions a little later. I'm going to make this kind of brief because we're kind of running low on time, but the basic setup is a little intro. We're going to do a little grounding ceremony. And then after that, we're going to have a little intro from all the speakers here. We have Bob Jesse on the far left there, Jay Starfox, Sassy Sassoon, and Hank Obermayer. After this, we're going to break out into little groups and kind of discuss these questions. Once we do that and kind of get all juiced up, we'll have a chance to come back and talk to everybody on the panel, give some question-answer session, and then we'll do a small little close-in. So thank you very much for being here. We have some food over here if you want a little later on. We also have some fantastic Shipibo wares over in the corner if you're interested, so check those out as well. And thank you very much for coming.
I'm doing the grounding. So that okay.
I'm just using one phone.
Hey, I'm Jay Starfox. To get us into our kind of space with this, I wanted to offer a grounding, just a few moments for us to remember why we're here. This is the Varieties of Nondually-informed Communities, Cultivating a Culture of Constructive Feedback. Our intent here tonight is to talk, to share, to feel about how it is we can work together as individuals and as representatives of a variety of intersecting communities so that we can give and receive constructive feedback. And so I'd like to take a moment to kind of maybe think about, picture, kind of feel how you feel when you're with some of your communities. and to think about the work that you do with and through and for those communities. And to honor the potential for that work to grow and flourish with the gift of more tools and skills and talk and experience around how we can give feedback. Thank you. I think Bob's going to start us off with introductions.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I would like to begin by offering to you a pledge. And I have two intentions. One is to have you notice it and think about how it might feel to take on something like that for yourself. So in that way, it could be said to be a demonstration or modeling. But I also really mean it. So it's real at the same time. And the pledge goes like this. I pledge to try to be open to feedback, especially to constructive feedback, especially to feedback that may be difficult for me to hear. I pledge to pay attention to how that's uncomfortable. I pledge to try to notice when I might try to become defensive or to rebuff that feedback, and to deal with that on my own and still let the feedback sink in. I pledge to do my best to be thankful for feedback, even when it creates discomfort in me. In other words, I'd really like to know if you see something that is concerning to you about me, or something that concerns you about my impact on someone else. It's an invitation for you to engage with me, and a pledge on my part to try to welcome that more than I have before. How did this come about? As you heard in the introduction, there is a person in our circle of communities, our community of communities, who died recently. The death was drug involved. This is somebody that I knew, not very well, but well enough to have shared some meals together and been to a number of events together. And I didn't know about this person's involvement with a drug of that kind of danger. But I did notice some addictive patterns with less harmful or less immediately harmful substances and some addictive behaviors. You know, enough to really kind of notice it. And after I learned that he died, part of my inquiry was to say, why didn't I engage him a little bit more about the things that I in fact noticed and were concerning to me? And I still don't have a full answer to that. Oh, we weren't that close. Oh, he's really a functional person who's very effective in the world and doesn't need me nosing and meddling in his life. Oh, if I bring it up, we'll have to process it. It'll take a long time. You know, these things weren't thought consciously. What I noticed behaviorally is that I didn't. And I've been asking myself in the time between then and now, was that loss preventable? Our communities, our friend relationships, so perfectly tuned and so highly developed that we are taking advantage of all of the wisdom available between us. And my opening hypothesis is that no, it's not perfectly tuned so that all the wisdom and concern available to us is given to us and we can receive it. It's complicated. If you give somebody feedback, there's no guarantee it's going to be received. It could conceivably put distance between you and the person. It could create discomfort on both parts. It might even backfire. I don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all solution or technique here. I imagine that concerns arising from addictions, for example, are different from, maybe more complicated than concerns arising from other things you might observe about someone. So again, no one size fits all. The intention here is to bounce up awareness a little bit and to have us all reflect more about how we can tap the wisdom that's available in our groups. That one loss was very dramatic and very profound and very tragic. However, it has prompted me to notice anew much less immediately troubling, concerning things that I notice amongst my friends and family members and community, far under the threshold of losing somebody to death. And I can point to lots of examples in my larger friend circles where we kind of, sometimes the person who is emitting the behavior is the last to hear about it or the last to know that somebody's noticed. Like people talk about it amongst themselves behind the person's back, but confronting the actual person or offering support to the actual person, sometimes that's the last thing that happens. And I suspect that it doesn't always need to be that way. I'd like to touch on why non-duality shows up in the title of this program. Because so far, everything that I've talked about, and I think much of what we will talk about this evening, doesn't have to do with altered states or chemicals or meditation. It has to do with more or less ordinary reality and the nitty-gritty of daily life. So what's this about non-dually informed communities? Well, safe assumption that many of us here are involved in one or more communities where the lifetime prevalence of people having a non-dual experience is pretty high. And that's actually a rarity in the culture at large. I wonder if we're in a bunch of people who we can imagine have probably had some experience like that, if that can somehow be leveraged as a touchstone, a point of common experience, a common reference point. Maybe that's a stretch. I don't know if it can or it can't. But it might be a particular advantage that we in our various communities have relative to communities that don't share that touchstone. So I look forward to talking about all of this with everyone here. Thank you.
Hello again. I wanted to start off by kind of mentioning some of the communities that I find myself embedded in, contributing to. One of my favorites is the community from my college that I graduated from. I went to Reed in Portland, and there's this amazing community of alumni and current students who have a variety of odd things in common and not in common. And I recently had the pleasure of meeting someone and talking with them for a bit and then finding out that we were both alumni from Reed, and kind of all of these things about this person's kind of little quirks just clicked in my mind, and it really made me smile. We sat together at the Women's Visionary Congress for an afternoon, and it felt very nourishing to have that intersection. I do work with the Radical Fairies. I cook for their logistical meetings. The Radical Fairies are a more than 40-year-old group that spun off from the Rainbow family. Originally it was gay men, and then it got too hard to tell who was a gay man and who wasn't. So they opened it up. And I do a lot with the Full Circle Tea House, which Annie Oak fearlessly, valiantly heads for us. Brings that to a number of events. I get to be the what is the phrase? The wayward partner of the Death Trap, which is a warehouse community that puts on events and creates an amazing place for people to live and create over in Oakland. And I teach yoga, and there's this kind of subtle community there. There's very few jobs you can have where you can just walk into a storefront, say, "Hi, I'm in town for a bit. I'm a yoga teacher. Do you need any help with anything?" And have these like amazing like 3-hour conversations and opportunities to contribute to this kind of growth, this kind of quiet movement that is really special. So that's enriched my life a great deal and given me confidence to share things like grounding exercises. So I just wanted to talk about myself a little bit. And one of the pieces that I bring to this conversation that's really important to me is the idea of sharing with friends. When I teach yoga, one of the best pieces of advice anyone ever gave me was to just imagine I'm sharing with friends. And often one of the best things you can do when sharing with friends is to share their struggles, to be present with someone when they're working through something, when they're having a hard time, when they're dealing with pain, and to just be in that space with them, even when it's difficult for you. And I think that that is a really important piece, and it really builds caring. It really builds intimacy. And to be able to safely build intimacy with a friend, a community member, a group of people, with yourself, to be able to sit with yourself that way, requires a great deal of safety. And I think one of the places where that safety really comes from is this idea of consent, of actually checking in with yourself, with whoever you're interacting with. And sometimes that can fit this like kind of set of check boxes where you like ask and they say yes, and you ask and they say yes, and it goes down this list and it's great. And you've done that. And afterwards, even when you've done that, sometimes it doesn't quite feel right. And it goes, this idea of consent can go a little deeper to consent as a felt experience. Sometimes none of those check boxes happen. You don't say a word. You don't even think about it, and it's awesome. And so being able to be paying attention, to know well enough how that's happened, I think all kind of really ties together with how to build intimacy. And one of the things that builds the most intimacy that I've seen is giving somebody feedback, to be with someone, to really notice what's going on with them, and then to be brave enough to approach them, to formulate something that you have to share, and how to make that intimacy building safe. It circles back around to really feeling that. And that's sort of something I've been chewing on for a while, and hopefully it can add and be something that grows.
Hello. Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate, or Sassy, or whatever you'd like to call me. And I would love to start by telling you 4 things that I am, and then why I'm here, and what I hope to contribute and support in this this lovely dialogue that I've been invited here today to participate in. So 4 things that I am. 1, I'm a scientist. I have a science degree from UC Berkeley, focusing specifically on the interaction between humans and how we categorize and resource base our natural world, whether or not we're a part of that or not, and how that flows and is molded and modeled in society through economic and also social terms. So I'm a scientist, and I bring that science lens to everything that I do, because why not? It's so fun. I'm also a facilitator. I run a business called Sassy Facilitation, where I do facilitation, education, and group process design in collectives, cooperatives, and any organization or group with a commitment to democracy. I've been blessed to live and work and participate in various kinds of collective endeavors since I was about 3 years old. So for me, I come to it as a very much normative frame, and the rest of the world looks crazy to me. So I bring that lens and now, goodness me, 6 years of professional business experience in that that world to this endeavor as well. And there I think a lot about the structures that support our communities and how can we derive the best structures for our communities and use them to support and grow our communities and create more robust, beautiful relationships that really support us as full individuals. So I'm a facilitator. I'm also a burner. I co-facilitate the Heebie-Jeebie Healers. We're a large healing collective on Playa, and we've been operating this will be our 16th year, and we very much focus on being a healing space for body, mind, and spirit within both the Black Rock community and the world at large. At this point, I think we've had over 8,000 folks come through our healing tent, which feels like a blessing and a half. And we very much ground out there and in the default world in all of the very intersectional experiences that my knowledge of CIIS tells me we might resonate with here. So I bring that as well. I'm a burner. And last, I am your unique and special yet garden variety bisexual polyamorous kinky person. I'm both an educator in adult sexuality in that world and also an enthusiastic participant in consent as enacted through all altered states. So I very much bring that lens to my facilitation work often and to any other kind of work. What are the kinds of high-level consent negotiations that you can learn from, for example, a kink or a romantic polyfidelitous situation? There's some very high-level intimacy tools that folks in those communities have developed, and those are accessible to folks not in those communities across a variety of circumstances. So those tools are things that I live with daily and very much am enthused to bring outside those spheres of community. So those are 4 things that I am: scientist, facilitator, burner, and queerdo. And all of those things together very much bring me to intersections. I very much live at the intersection of all things. I call myself a fence sitter with very much a lot of pride, because when you stand on top of the fence, you can see everything. And if that's true, then what can we learn from the intersections of all these different disciplines? And it often prompts me to ask questions. You, person completely different from me, what lessons can I derive from our interaction? You, person who has an experience completely different from mine, where is our common ground? What is our community basis? And how can we talk to each other across those? And so that is very much my geek, my enthusiasm, the center of my passion. And so I'm really feeling extremely blessed to be invited to yet another intersectionality that I believe can benefit from a lot of the tools I have. And I'm so excited to learn both from your experiences and the wonderful people sitting next to me. So that's who I am and why I'm here. And I'm really excited to talk with y'all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hank, and the pieces of my life that bring me here right now, the piece that's most relevant today in some ways, I've lived in, a little bit like Sassy, I've lived in intentional communities for 27 years. And so I bring this experience of seeing all different kinds of conflict and people behaving in ways that aren't very good for other people or not very good for themselves, and a multitude of ways people have navigated in that. The entheogenic side hasn't really been a piece of focus in the residential communities I've lived in, but it's the same. In some ways, it's the same issues. I also have a counseling practice where I work with people who are trying to deal with integrating experiences into their lives, where they primarily entheogenic experiences, but also vision quests, meditation retreats, where they've had mystical experiences, sometimes very intentionally set up mystical experiences, and helping them navigate how to harvest from that. In relation to this, what keeps coming to my mind, because of my intentional community background, is how people navigate relationships, boundaries, decisions around children. That's what keeps popping in my mind again and again, where different people have different values about how to relate things, different people have different ideas about what's safe, what's not safe. And there's some things where people have common perspectives but aren't really sure what to do, things that are communicated, not communicated. So that comes up for me, and then meeting process and conflict mediation. One particular place I found really interesting is some of the Quaker tools. So those are just themes that are just sort of ever present in my life. in relation to the entheogenic work, I also think of boundaries around people harming other people or themselves, like people, for example, who are facilitating entheogenic work and have background and support for that, and then think that they can do sexual healing but don't have the support and initiation and training around that, or vice versa. So those are some of the areas that come to my mind the most. How do we find the support we need to support others? Where do we find that backup? Where does that come from in community? What structures does that come from? And what relationships does that come from? And the last thing is something I sort of speak on, I sort of bring up a lot. In relation to entheogenic work, one thing I notice is a lot of people who use entheogenic experiences actually as a way to support their addictions, who use it to escape, whether you want to call it addiction to peak experience, addiction to non-dual experiences, but that's also fairly common. And so how do we support people in dealing with that, going to someplace very deep and real, but using that as, on one level, but using that as a way to not be present in this world? So those are different themes that come to my mind that seem most relevant. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So next, we're going to do a little bit, before we jump right into question and answer, so we have a little time to kind of get juicy about what we'd like to actually talk about. We thought we would do a little bit of group breakout where you get to talk to the folks next to you and talk to the folks behind you. We'll do a little bit of focusing on this so that we can really generate some amazing questions to dig deeply in the limited time we have this evening. So if I could present a small framework for how we're going to engage in that, I'm going to talk about these little questions that we've got here up on the board. Whoop. I'm going to not strangle Hank. All right, so if you would get into groups of like 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever feels organic and comfortable for y'all, if you could, you can start off with like, this is my name, if you'd like to call me, and here's a community that I'm engaged in, so it gives you a little context for where I might be talking about this from. And then these are 3 questions, and each of them kind of have 2 parts, and we're going to dig deeply into these in group, hopefully. And you can either share an experience or a thought, or if you have nothing to share, obviously you have the right to pass. But if you have something to share, please share. And we'll go over just about how much time we have in a moment. So the questions are looking at yourself. What enables me to receive feedback well? What are the circumstances? When do you receive feedback well? Have you eaten? Are you in a certain place or time? Is it a certain time of day? Is it a phase of the moon? What are the things that help you really receive feedback well, right? And then what blocks you from receiving feedback? What are the things that you get feedback and normally this would be fine, but in this moment it's not? What is it about that moment, right? Or what is it about a circumstances like that block you from receiving that feedback? And then this doesn't just happen at the self level, right? This happens at the community level, because communities have norms, we have culture, we do things, we don't do things here, this is okay, this is not okay. Those are things that communities have, right? So communities, we can look at our communities and say, in our community, what enables my community to receive feedback well? Or conversely, what blocks my community from receiving feedback well? So that's a level you can think at. And then just to get really concrete, if this is all too esoteric or too up there for you, to get really concrete, you could think about sharing an example of when you noticed some behavior in another person, perhaps in your community, that concerned you. And you noticed that, you had that concern and you noticed it, but you did not speak up. What was that like? Why? How? Etc. Or you noticed it and you did speak up. And how? Why? How did that go? Etc. So there's just some questions that we can use to kind of talk amongst ourselves and think about. And we're going to take a little bit of time to do that. How much time do we still have for that?
Let's see. We probably have a half an hour or so.
Okay.
That probably enables groups of maybe 4 people.
Okay.
It's probably helpful to pick up the chairs and spread out in the room to have a little bit of distance between you and the next group.
Or if you don't feel like moving, you can just organically evolve how you are or where you are, etc. And let's go for 25 minutes. And so if we have 25 minutes and there's 4 people in a group, then all of you get about 5 minutes to talk total, right? A little bit of time for trotting around. So self-manage, but do dig deeply, because we're here to do real work, right? We're here to answer real questions. We have this opportunity to do that together. So take a moment to actually really think about these and share with your group, and then that will hopefully inform what we all as a group come back to talk to you about together. Okay? Everybody clear on what we're doing right now? Any questions? Break.
And some of the panelists would like to join a group.
Oh, yes. Hello.